Now we're back in Africa. Precisely, we're going to Egypt to look at what is playing out as regards the budget, financing the budget for Egypt. The government is looking at real estate as a way of escape to be able to manage its budget deficit. We've been joined by in-house analyst. We still have Sam Orovwuje joining us this morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Femi. A pleasure to be here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you.
All right. Let's look at the decision by the government, the Egyptian government, to finance its budget deficit, through land sales, looking at real estate. How strategic do you think this could be?
Thank you very much indeed. I think the decision of Arab Republic of Egypt to look into the sales of real estate is particularly interesting, and one of the major fallout of that decision was that the government itself has made a massive investment in real estate on the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, which is not far from one of the big cities of Alexandria. That project, which is called Ras Al Hikma, is a major development real estate sector, a luxury estate along the Mediterranean coast, which Abu Dhabi is buying over at the rate of over 24 billion US dollar, and that will help to finance the deficit budget, in addition to the 20 million lifeline from the IMF and about 3 billion from the World Bank. So that kind of investment opportunity that the government was able to weigh in so that they can finance a deficit budget of 2023-2024 budget is welcoming. But there are some African countries that don't even have that kind of investment to fall back on. So that is particularly interesting for a country that has some massive investment they can use to cushion the deficit. And there's a projection that at the end of the day, they are likely to have a surplus budget if they are able to tighten their belt, according to the finance minister, Mohamed Meiti, who gave an account of some of the development after the meeting with IMF.
What's your thoughts on selling national assets to fund a budget? So what happens in the next year when there is also a budget deficit? Some countries would rather borrow to finance a budget rather than sell off national assets.
You create assets primarily for the rainy day. So I don't think, in my view, that when you sell national assets is a bad decision. As you sell some assets and you're able to have a budget surplus, other investments are made in other sectors. So in my personal view, selling those assets are not really wrong. It's an investment decision that was made for the rainy day, and if the government has made a choice to use part of that to finance its budget deficit, I think it's in order. And naturally, you sell assets to recoup some of the investment that you can apply to some other new challenges as it occurs, even at a personal level. So I think that was a wise decision, rather than creating an exposure through excessive borrowing, in my view.
Now you have these expected loan, the $20 billion from IMF and the $3 billion from the World Bank. If you have that in view, then why is it necessary to engage in sales of these assets?
I think to a large extent is just to balance the budget. They don't want an overexposure in terms of...
is that not what you call an overkill?
No, I don't think it's an overkill. They have what it takes to be able to finance the budget. So they put some of the national assets on sale to get part of the investment to finance the budget. And if you hear the minister very well, Mohamed Meiti was saying that once this initiative is concluded, there's a likelihood that there will be a surplus budget at the end of this fiscal year. So I think it's a wise decision, so it's not an overkill. So for example, if they didn't have that national asset that they can put up on sale and the kind of investment that they are going to recoup, they will have been in a very dangerous financial situation, which would have been further impacted negatively on the Egyptian, particularly after the deregulation of the Egyptian pounds in the last 2 years.
Let's look at the IMF support that they're also counting on. Now, as part of the IMF package, Egypt had to devalue its currency to around 50 Egyptian pounds to the dollar from 30.85 pounds. And they raised also interest rates by 600 basis points. What do you make of this deal?
Well, I think when you are in a difficult situation, sometimes the decision-making process to survive beyond the current issue becomes a very difficult process. But by and large, I think the decision will have been made in the benefit of the citizens. Rather than not able to finance the budget for the fiscal year, they've made a decision to devalue their currency based on the IMF conditionality, and that they have raised their interest rates about 600 points, almost in comparison to what Nigeria did recently to about 400 points. So I think that within the financial framework analysis, those who are in the boardroom of IMF and those who are in the government part may have looked at the various financial scenarios and they come with that decision. I think in the final analysis, what is important is that they are able to finance their budget for the benefit of the citizen.
But should that be the only thing to look out for, being able to finance the budget? Because it does look like the IMF strong-armed Egypt in this particular case. And doesn't that question the motive of the IMF towards African countries?
Yeah, there's no doubt international conspiracy as a major problem with the Bretton Woods institution. But when you have a global financial architecture that is dependent on the existing financial framework, you have no option to depend on them. But on the other hand, African leaders must be very disciplined rather than see how they can shake off some of the leakages within the public finance models that they operate, so that more often than not, they don't need to resort to the IMF for bailout when they have a budget deficit. So we need to balance this art of always going. There are some countries that have refused to go to IMF to borrow, but there's nothing really wrong in trying to get money. To what extent can the money be put to use and benefit citizens?
Like you said, there's nothing wrong in borrowing or obtaining loans, but what do you make of the patterns in Africa where nations in Africa quickly run to IMF, World Bank to obtain loans, not just for investment, but for recurring expenditures, and you have this pattern of relying on these foreign bodies to finance budget or to finance major projects? Can't we look inward? How do you react to this pattern in Africa?
Well, there's a distortion in the international financial system already that favors the global north. But then African leaders, on the other hand, are not really disciplined in terms of public finance management. So more often than not, they are oversubscribed, not be able to do state investment based on the kind of the revenues that they have. But again, this is occasioned more often than not by the level of corruption that public service in Africa has been known for over the years. But then we need a mind shift, a mind engineering to move us away from this over-reliance on the Bretton Woods institution. Then the primary commodity that God has endowed us with, we must find a way to exploit them more meaningfully so that we can have a kind of direct revenue in terms of manufacturing, in terms of process, in terms of service within Africa, so that we can always balance our public budget.
So let's look at the conditions that have been given and to which Egypt has agreed to get the support of the IMF. First of all, devaluing the currency. what implication will it have on the economy and also increasing interest rates? Fine, the budget to be funded, but what would be the fallout of this decision on the Egyptian economy?
Once you devalue, the value of the local currency will impact negatively on the system. What do I mean? Once that currency is devalued, the amount of disposable income that the citizens have to spend has been devalued as a reduction. So if you have like 10 naira and you have moved down 5 places, so what 10 naira could possibly have bought for you, 5 naira may not be able to do that. So it has some implication. But if you look at the aggregate, the sum total of what will benefit the citizen later, when you get that money in terms of be able to finance various projects, I'm sure at the end of the day, if they come to a level of surplus, then more disposable income will be available for citizens to spend. But that's the challenge of public finance management, where more often than not, government is not able to balance its budget, and they look for financing to be able to do the deficit. But I think we must look inward as a collective in Africa to address this issue of this bogus public finance that we don't have revenue to sustain.
Now let's make reference to the Suez Canal. We're talking about Egypt now. How do you think the activities that played out in the last few months in that region has affected the revenue for Egypt?
Yeah, because of the high level of piracy, particularly from some of the militants on the other front close to the sea, the volume of shipment that come into that area has been affected to a very large extent. Even the minister also made reference to that there are a lot of things that have been held back in the port, which are gradually being released, and that will boost the economy. So overall, there's a negative impact from sea pirates of the Houthis rebel that has been obstructing trade movement on that Suez Canal.
Do you think the Egyptian government has any chance to make any difference, curtailing the activities of pirates in that canal?
Oh yes, I think they are already discussing among themselves in line with the UK and some other countries that do supply chain via that. So they've been making some commitment. Even the US made some commitment in terms of policing that area so that trade can move smoothly across that sea line.
What do you find in common between Egypt and other African countries? Now, we understand that the crisis around the Suez Canal has affected Egypt's financial inflows, but until very recently, that had not been a major problem to financial inflows. So what happens to the days where there was abundance?
Yeah, but they use the abundance very well. Look at Air Hikma that was put on sale for over $24 billion to Abu Dhabi. That's surpluses that were made and were invested properly. So the challenge here is that some of the rascals on that, particularly Houthis rebel, trying to see Israel war with the Gaza as a revenge on some of those things coming into that environment. I'm sure that with America coming to that environment, some sanity will be brought. But Egypt has not really done too badly in the last few years in terms of how they manage their resources. They have a lot of major investment, particularly on the Mediterranean coast. It just puts one of the land assets for sale that will help them to cushion the negative effect on budget deficits.
Now, before we go on a break, if they had many assets, like you say, why would they take up a deal with the IMF that will further impoverish the economy?
Yeah, but I remember in one of the questions that you put up earlier, you're thinking why there's a need to go and borrow, or why will you sell your national asset? So if you take a particular asset vis-a-vis your immediate problem, at least you're able to free an asset to resolve your issue. So you cannot put all your assets for sale at a particular point in time. So they cannot just put all the assets. This is what they consider important at this particular point in time. And if they are able to, based on their forecast, they come to a budget surplus, I'm sure that they are going to make some investment in other assets that they have. There are even other critical assets in Sharm el-Sheikh and Luxor that are almost at the same level with this asset that was just put on sale.
The U.S. Deputy Secretary, his Treasury Secretary, Alliance is in South Africa. He's in South Africa. Talking about the visit. Interestingly, this is a Nigerian. While Adeyemo was born in Ibadan, and interestingly was part of Obama's administration. So, what would you consider to be very strategic about this visit to South Africa?
Thank you very much indeed, Femi. Wale, as the Americans would pronounce it, Wale.
It's actually Wale.
Yes, it's spelled double-L-Y, but it's Wale, our own Wale, dear Wale. So the point here is that in the last 2 years, there's been a growing tension between South Africa and the United States of America. South Africa has a very good trading relationship with America, but with its interest in BRICS, that tension has been threatening their trade relationship. So the U.S. Deputy Secretary for Treasury, Wale Adeyemo, is in South Africa today for a 5-day working visit to see how they can repair that relationship to improve on trade. And one of the high cross of those discussions, they'll be talking about illicit financing, youth empowerment, and technology, and some other things, to see how they can show up the trade relationship between the two countries. And South Africa is one of the most industrialized countries in Africa, and the volume of trade between South Africa and the U.S. has been very remarkable. But this new tension, particularly from this relationship with China and Russia, and this dominant role in BRICS, is threatening what they do with the Americans. So I think this is just a kind of shuttle diplomacy to improve on the strategic relationship that exists between the two countries. So I see this more as a damage control visit. The outcomes in the few years to come remain to be seen.
All right, how much of damage control do you think can be achieved with this visit? And secondly, when the U.S. Secretary of State visited Nigeria around this time too, not so far time ago, it was somewhat attributed to the forthcoming elections. Is that still a factor here?
Yes, in international diplomacy, you cannot rule out politics. The elections are close. The two dominant torchbearers for the White House, they are in their campaign movement. So politics on the one hand, and you have a greater majority, just like you have Nigerians. There are a lot of South Africans in the US, and I'm sure they are kind of undertone negotiations that will play out, particularly on youth entrepreneurship, which is one of the fine cross of this visit. But like I said earlier, the immediate impact of this diplomatic shuttle remain to be seen, particularly with the overbearing influence of South Africa, particularly South Africa having the audacity to even take Israel to the International Court of Justice based on the accusation of genocide against the people of Palestine. So these are core international diplomacy issues that has economic undertone. But the best way to relate in the international arena is through these kinds of negotiation.
Now, what do you make of the decision to send an African this time around? You have a Nigerian to a South African, Africa to Africa. How significant is that?
I think essentially they must be targeting The youth population, if you look at about six elements that underscore that visit, I think youth and entrepreneurship seems to be very core of that existence. So it's targeting that very vibrant youth population that we have in South Africa, and that diplomatic nicety that we play out in terms of the negotiation, in terms of the discussion, we will to get to the focal points of some of the youth and how that can shape some of their friends and relations back in the US towards the election. But if you ask me personally, I'm sure that the mileage for this visit is still remain to be seen.
All right, so the visit will also include discussions on sanctions. Now, but it's not as if it's about sanctions on South Africa, sanctions imposed on Moscow, Russia, over the invasion of Ukraine. Why is it important to talk about that with South Africa, even though South Africa has declared neutrality in all of the issues?
Yes, it's the right of place for South Africa to declare some neutrality, but in actual practice, that neutrality is not really there. There's been a kind of a relationship with Russia that's in the public domain, and that Russia, through South Africa, has been trying to get dominance, particularly in trade in Africa. And we see the commonality of South African role in the BRICS nation, and the way they are able to pull some of Africa, including Egypt, who is just a new member in that configuration. So I'm sure that, again, they are using this to smoothen the relationship, the existing tension that exists between South Africa and the United States of America. And you see that if they are able to win South Africa over, maybe the road to Moscow might be smoother. Those are just my prognosis.
All right. If you look at the marriage between the US and Africa, it's been an age-long union. But let's look at the toast being extended by Russia and China to these same African countries. Looking at South Africa, do you see any threat to this age-long marriage in terms of partnership and economic ties? And what do you make of the overture being extended by Russia to most of these African countries?
There's already a tension between the US and Africa. In the last 10 years or so, there's been dwindling trade relationship between Africa as a continent and that of US. China has overtaken the United States of America in terms of volume of trade, bilateral relationship between Africa, and the growing dominance of China is worrisome to the United States of America. And I think to a very large extent, as Dr. Idausa mentioned some few days ago, that America has moved away from its core essence of capitalism. And this move to some socialism has brought some issue to the United States of America. So he was making a call that America should go to the fundamentals of capitalism so that they can continue to create some economic prosperity. And the dominance of China, they shouldn't really bother so much if they can put their house in order. And I think I subscribe to his views. So American has lost it, truly speaking, in terms of trade. In the last 10 years, like I mentioned, the trade has been dropping, while China, in terms of the graph, is moving upwards.
All right, so Adeyemo will also talk with South Africa in areas on how they can halt illegal wildlife trade. Now, why is this a major problem?
Well, there's a global call for wildlife conservation in terms of preserving nature's gift, and people have been pushing some wildlife, and what they do, regrettably, and I think that's in the public domain, there's a wide range of pushing activities in terms of illicit trade, in terms of ivories and all that move from South Africa through to the United States. So they want to find a way to put a halt on this illicit trade. So again, that's one of these core discussions that we have in terms of conservation, which is in line even with the climate change imperative that we're talking about. So that is difficult. Even the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, when he was in president there, was always complaining about the growing illicit outflow of even financials in terms of wildlife that pull out of South Africa. So hopefully, if there are some partnership and regulatory framework that will help to reduce that, that will be a welcome development out of this diplomatic engagement.
All right, let's wrap up with these. Are there other expectations or other things you feel what the AMO could address in South Africa to take advantage of the visit?
Those line items that form part of his visit, number one, reducing the tension between South Africa and the United States of America in terms of trade, this wildlife conservation that we talked about, youth and entrepreneurship, another trade relationship. Maybe what they can do is that there may be existing bilateral relationship they need to clean up. The visit to that extent will improve on the relationship. But I doubt, in my personal view, that the result of that visit will not be seen in a very close time, based on South African dominant role in the BRICS nation and their strong campaign for a currency that will bring down the United States of America as an international denominator in terms of financing trade. Those are my personal views.
All right, before we wrap up, let's go back to the Egypt issue. Egypt raising funds for its budgets. Now, what is the lesson to learn from Egypt in how they've been able to secure assets that they now sell? And this assets that they're selling now is being bought by the UAE. What's your take on the UAE making investments outside of its territory? And this one has to do directly with tourism and hospitality.
Just to put it simply, investing for the future of their citizen. They have done very well. When you have investment and you're able to, beyond your shores, beyond your border, you're creating assets for prosperity for the future. And I think they are worthy of emulation in terms of disciplined financial planning, and they're able to move assets elsewhere. So whether it's tourism, whether it's health sector. So on the other hand, the lesson for us, particularly as a country, when we deregulated some of our sector, some of the revenue or receivable that we got from those sales of assets, we don't see the impact in terms of how it has helped us. So this administration, why there's a debate, a growing debate in the public space, that government does not have business in business. But for me, government has business in business, because even though as a facilitator, Egypt made some massive investment in real estate. So at the point of difficulty, they were able to realize those assets to balance their budget. So for Africa and for Nigeria, what we need to do is to create values beyond this idea where you have just about 5% of your national budget for capital project. I think is worrisome. So we must mirror these countries that are investing for the prosperity of their citizens.
Thank you very much, Sam Orovwuje, Director, Center for Public Policy, and also in-house analyst here at Souq News, for being on the show with us today.
My pleasure, Blessing, as always.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.